I've seen a lot of classified footage in my life, but nothing prepared me for what the FBI buried after this mission. The body cam footage doesn't just show a creature, it shows what it does to people who get too close. What really happened to the FBI team that was ripped apart in the woods that night? The air in the forest was cold enough to sting. It smelled like wet bark and iron, and the fog hung low, curling around the black trunks like smoke. The sound of boots crunching over frost and leaves broke the stillness. 5 FBI agents walked in a slow line through the tall evergreens, their breath puffing white in the early morning light. They were part of a search crew sent to find 2 missing hikers. It had been 5 days since the hikers vanished near the north slope of Mount St. Helens. The area was known for strange sounds at night, but no one ever stayed long enough to find out why. Agent Morgan led the team. He was tall, quiet, and used to danger, but something about this place made his skin crawl. The trees were too still, the air too thick. Even the birds seemed to know something was wrong. Behind him, Agent Reyes carried the tracker, scanning the ground for prints. "Got something," she said softly. She bent down and brushed away the frost. What she found wasn't from a man. The print was enormous, 22 inches long and almost twice as wide as her hand. The toes were deep and flat, with no claw marks. The team stared in silence. Morgan knelt beside the print, measuring it with a small ruler. "Too big for a bear," he muttered, "and too deep for a prank." The ground shook slightly when a wind rolled down from the ridge, and the sound of snapping branches echoed somewhere in the fog. "Could be a trick," said Agent Harris, though his voice didn't sound sure. "Could be," Morgan said, "but let's find out who's playing it." They kept walking, following the line of prints that led down a steep slope toward a narrow creek. The smell hit them first, a sharp, rotting odor, like meat left in the sun. When they reached the water, they found what was left of an elk. Its body was torn open, ribs showing white under the gray sky. The ground around it was soaked with blood, and the air buzzed with flies even in the cold. Something had eaten it, but not cleanly. Pieces of fur and bone were scattered up the bank. Agent Reyes covered her nose with her sleeve. "What could do this?" she whispered. No one answered. Morgan turned on his radio. "HQ, we found the missing hiker's trail. We've got fresh prints and a large kill. Send drone support." Static crackled through the speaker. No voice answered. He tried again. Nothing but white noise. "We're too far out," he said. "Keep recording everything." As the day went on, the fog lifted just enough to see the ridge ahead. The sun was pale, weak against the dark forest. They set up camp near a fallen cedar and began unpacking their gear: cameras, thermal scanners, and a drone the size of a backpack. The whir of its blades broke the silence as it lifted into the air. On the small monitor, Morgan watched the gray shapes of trees slide past below. "Scan Sector 4, he said. The drone flew higher, passing over a patch of broken trees where the snow was flattened in wide circles, as if something huge had rolled or fought there. Then, on the edge of the frame, a heat signature blinked. "Got movement?" Reyes said. "North ridge, about 50 meters. The heat mark moved slow and steady, then stopped. It was too large to be a man and too smooth to be a bear. The shape turned once toward the camera, and the feed glitched, static lines and black frames. When the picture returned, the heat signature was gone. The screen showed only empty trees. Morgan frowned. "Playback." Reyes rewound, but the moment the shape appeared again, the file skipped forward on its own. "It's corrupt," she said. "It's like the data's being erased." Night fell fast, the sky turned black, and the forest went quiet again. The team built a small fire, though the flames felt weak against the cold. Harris cooked a can of beans and tried to joke about local legends, but no one laughed. "You think this is what people have been seeing up here?" he asked. "Some big ape, a bear that walks funny?" Morgan didn't answer. He was staring into the dark beyond the firelight. At 2300 hours, the first sound came. It started as a low growl, almost like thunder far away. Then it rose higher, longer, turning into a deep howl that shook the trees. It didn't sound like a wolf or a man. It was both. The agents froze. The sound came again, closer this time. "Record that," Morgan whispered. Reyes aimed her recorder toward the woods. The howl echoed off the cliffs, and smaller sounds followed. A second, then a third answering from different directions. Multiple source, Reka said, her voice trembling. At least three. Morgan checked his weapon, the metal cold in his hands. The forest went still again. No wind, no night birds. Just silence thick enough to hear their own breathing. Let's keep visual on the perimeter, Morgan said. They split into pairs, scanning the tree line with the flashlights. The beams cut through the foam but caught only drifting mist and branches. The quiet made their hearts beat louder. Then, from the far end of camp came a sudden snap, a branch breaking, heavy footsteps moving fast through the brush. Harris swung his light. There, he shouted. For a second, something massive moved between the trees, a tall shape, dark and wide. Shoulders like a bear, but upright like a man. It disappeared before anyone could focus. Morgan ran forward, but the shape was gone. Only the smell of earth and a strange musk lingered in the air. We're not alone, he said. Everyone stay close. They regrouped by the fire, checking their cameras. The footage from Harris's body cam showed only blur and static. But one frame caught a faint reflection. Two eyes, glowing pale yellow just beyond the trees. The rest of the night stretched on, long and heavy. The howls came and went, always far enough to make them doubt, yet close enough to keep them awake. Near dawn, a thick fog rolled back in, muffling every sound. When the sun rose, it painted the world gray and white. The prints were still there, fresh, deeper now, leading away into the mist. Morgan packed his gear and looked down the trail. Whatever's out here, he said quietly, it doesn't want to be found. But we already found it. The others looked at him, tired and pale, waiting for the order to move. He turned toward the prints again. The trees ahead looked darker now, bending together like a mouth about to close. They followed the trail deeper into the woods, their breaths puffing white, their radios still dead. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft crunch of their boots and the distant drip of melting frost. Above them, a crow gave one sharp cry, then flew off into the fog. No one noticed the faint shape watching from the ridge, the tall shadow that stayed perfectly still as they passed below, its eyes reflecting the pale morning light like glass. The morning light felt weak and gray as the fog began to thin. The forest around them looked wet, every branch dripping, every surface dark with dew. The team walked in a line again, quiet now, following the trail of the huge prints deeper into the valley. Each step crunched against frozen ground, each sound bouncing off the trees. The air smelled like pine and something sour, like old meat. Agent Reyes kept checking her scanner, its small green light flickering. The tracker showed motion one moment, then nothing the next. It's like something's blocking the signal, she said. Agent Morgan stopped to check his map. We're off-grid, he said. About 6 miles from the drop point. He lifted his radio again. HQ, this is Alpha Team. Come in. Only static answered him. A sharp wind blew down from the ridge, carrying a low, strange whistle that made the hair on his arms stand up. They moved forward, stepping around roots and fallen trees. Then Agent Harris pointed. Over there. A shape hung in the trees ahead. As they got closer, they saw what it was. A camera, their own. It had been set up the night before, tied to a pine trunk and aimed toward the valley. But now the lens was cracked, the cord torn out. The metal frame was bent like something strong had gripped it. That's not wind damage, said Reyes. Morgan took out another battery pack, trying to save what he could from the camera. The screen lit up for only a second, showing a broken file list. Most of the videos were missing or corrupted. One clip remained. He pressed play. The screen flickered, showing the dark forest at night. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then, from the corner of the frame, a tall figure stepped into view. Its shape filled the screen, wide shoulders, long arms that nearly touched the ground. It paused, turned toward the lens, and for one heartbeat they saw its eyes, reflective, yellow, unblinking. Then the picture glitched, lines of white static filling the display before it went black. Rhea swallowed hard. It knows we're here, she said. By afternoon, the weather turned. The sky darkened fast, heavy clouds rolling in like smoke. The temperature dropped, and a cold rain began to fall. They found shelter under a cluster of old cedars and set up a small base. The rain tapped on the tent like fingers. Harris worked to repair the drone, wiping water off the controls. "We'll send it up again when the rain stops," he said. "Get a better view of whatever's out there." Morgan sat near the tent door, listening to the forest. The sound of the rain should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It masked other sounds, small, sharp ones. Footsteps, branches snapping. He peeked outside, but saw only gray mist and trees. He told himself it was just wind. When the rain eased, they launched the drone again. It rose above the trees, its camera showing wide sweeps of dark forest. The monitor showed shapes of rocks, creeks, and fallen logs. Then something flickered again, a tall outline moving between two trees. "There," said Reyes, zooming in. The image grew clearer. The shape stopped beside a ridge, its head turning toward the drone. They could see the outline of arms, longer than a man's, and a chest covered in dark, wet hair. It tilted its head as if listening, then the feed cut off with a loud crack of static. The drone spun out of control and crashed into the trees. "The signal's gone," said Harris. He looked nervous now. Something hit it. Before anyone could answer, a deep noise rolled through the forest. It wasn't thunder. It was closer. A growl, low, whine, and wet, like air forced through a hollow chest. The sound vibrated in their ribs. "Weapons ready," Morgan said. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes were wide. They moved out from under the trees, forming a small circle, flashlights and rifles pointed into the dark. The growl came again, louder. Then everything went quiet. Suddenly a scream cut through the forest. It came from behind them, high and human. They turned, running toward the sound. "Parker!" Morgan shouted. Parker had been watching the rear. When they reached the clearing, his flashlight was still rolling on the ground, but Parker was gone. Only deep drag marks led into the brush. They followed the marks for about 30 feet until they found him, or what was left of him. He was wedged high in a pine, about 40 feet up, his jacket shredded, his body limp and twisted. The bark was torn where he'd been dragged upward. The smell was thick and coppery. Reyes covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Harris turned away, whispering a prayer. Morgan looked up, his jaw tight. "We're leaving," he said, "now." They started back toward the camp, moving fast, but the forest seemed to shift around them. Trails that had been clear were now blocked by fallen trees. Their compasses spun uselessly. "We're being led," Reyes said. "It's hurting us." The words hung in the air like smoke. The rain began again, heavier this time, blurring everything. Their flashlights caught movement now and then, a shape slipping behind trees, a flash of gray fur, a glimpse of something tall in the fog. Each time they looked, it vanished. By nightfall, they made camp again, though none of them slept. The fire sputtered and hissed, throwing weak light on their faces. Morgan replayed the drone footage again and again, freezing the frame where the creature looked toward the lens. The eyes glowed faintly, almost human, almost knowing. "It watches us the way we watch it," he said quietly. Reyes nodded, her voice small, "like it's guarding something." A loud crash made them all jump. One of the tents ripped open, a shadow darting past in the dark. They fired their lights and saw only the shredded fabric flapping in the wind. The ground near the campfire showed fresh prints, huge, pressed deep, still dripping with rainwater. They circled their camp again, weapons raised, but nothing came out of the trees. The night dragged on, thick with fear. Reyes tried to fix the radio again, turning the dial slowly. For a brief second, they caught a sound. Static, then a voice. "Alpha Team. Report. Repeat." It was gone before they could answer. When dawn came, the forest was silent again. Their supplies were scattered. The food bags were torn, the metal cooler crushed flat like it had been stepped on. Harris found something else near the fire pit, a broken piece of wood, marked with deep scratches, almost symbols. "What does that mean?" he asked. Morgan studied it. The marks looked carved, not random, circles and lines, repeating. He had no answer. They buried what was left of Parker before moving on. The forest seemed endless now, every direction the same. Each sound made them flinch. They stopped only once at the edge of a wide clearing where the ground was covered in half-eaten bones, animal bones and something else that wasn't animal. Reyes knelt to pick up a small scrap of fabric tangled in the grass. It was part of a human sleeve. As they turned to leave, Morgan felt the weight of eyes on him again, heavy and cold. He looked back and saw, for only a breath, the shape standing at the far end of the clearing. It didn't move. I just watched it. Then the fog rolled in again, and it was gone. The forest swallowed the team as they kept walking, tired and scared, not knowing they were already being surrounded. In the trees above them, branches creaked under the weight of something huge. A drop of water fell from a leaf and landed on Reyes's shoulder. She looked up, her flashlight shaking. The light caught a face, broad, dark, and still, staring down from the branches before it slipped away like a shadow melting into the night. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe. I don't want you missing out on tomorrow's new Bigfoot story. Thanks for watching. The storm that night came fast and hard. The wind howled through the trees like a scream, shaking the tents and tearing branches from above. The rain fell in sheets, cold and sharp, soaking the ground until it turned to mud. Agent Morgan sat in the corner of his tent, clutching his radio, trying again and again to call for help. Only static hissed back at him. His hands were trembling. He wasn't sure if it was from cold or fear. Outside, Reyes was sitting near the fire pit, her face ball under the flickering light. Her camera was still running, though she didn't seem to notice. "It's watching us," she said softly. "I can feel it. Every time I close my eyes, it's closer." Morgan looked at her, wanting to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't. He felt it too, the sense that the forest itself had eyes. Harris was pacing, his voice was shaky. "We have to move," Teddy said. "We can't stay here another night. It's picking us off one by one." Morgan looked out through the rain. "Move where?" he said. "We don't even know where we are." A loud crash echoed in the trees. All three turned toward the sound. A tree had fallen or been pushed. They heard another crack, closer this time. The fire hissed as rain poured harder. Then came the smell again. Wet fur and rot. Reyes lifted her camera, her hands trembling. The lens caught only darkness, but the microphone picked up something heavy moving between the trees. A slow, dragging step, then another. Harris raised his rifle. "Come on, show yourself," he shouted. Morgan grabbed his arm. "Stop. You'll just make it angry." But before he could pull him back, something big rushed past the edge of the firelight. The wind from his movement blew ash and sparks into the air. Harris fired once, the sound exploding through the rain. The gunshot echoed, then faded. Nothing answered. They stood frozen, listening. The forest went quiet again, except for the rain. Then from somewhere in the dark came a deep breath, a long, slow exhale that sounded almost human. It was close, so close that they could feel it in their chests. Morgan turned on his flashlight, sweeping the beam through the trees. For a second he saw it. The creature stood just beyond the reach of the light, huge, covered in dripping hair, eyes reflecting yellow like glass. It didn't move. It just stared. Then it stepped back and was gone. Reyes began to shake. "It's not trying to hide anymore," she said. "It wants us to see it." Her voice broke into a sob. Morgan told her to pack up, to get ready to leave as soon as the rain stopped. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't matter. By morning, the storm had passed. The world was gray and still. Steam rose from the wet ground. Their camp was a wreck, half the tents gone, their food scattered. One of their rifles was missing, and deep footprints circled the area like a trap. Morgan's eyes were red from not sleeping. He looked older now, his face lined with mud and worry. Rhea sat beside the fire ring, her camera still running. She talked about it like a diary. "We found something that shouldn't exist," she whispered. "It's stronger than we are. Smarter, too. It's not an animal, it's something else." Her voice cracked. "If anyone finds this, don't come here. Don't look for us." They started walking again, following a dry creek bed that wound between cliffs. The air grew colder as they went, the sun weak behind thick clouds. Every few minutes, one of them would turn, sure they heard footsteps behind them. But there was never anything there. Around midday, they found a cave hidden by fallen branches. Morgan decided they'd rest there for a while. The cave smelled of earth and something faintly metallic. Inside, the walls were damp and smooth. Rhea shined her light along the stone and froze. "Look," she said. The beam caught lines carved into the rock, symbols like the ones they'd seen on the broken wood at camp. Circles crossed with long slashes, repeating patterns that looked almost like writing. "Someone made this," Harris said. "Or something did." In the back of the cave, they found bones. Some were small, animal bones, but others were larger, human-sized. A skull lay half buried in dirt, its jaw missing. Next to it was a torn piece of fabric, the same color as the uniform of one of the missing hikers. Morgan's breath came out slow and cold. "We need to go," he said. As they turned to leave, a loud roar filled the cave, shaking dust from the ceiling. It was deafening. The sound came from outside, echoing off the cliffs. Harris lifted his gun. "It's right out there," he whispered. They waited, but nothing came in. Then slowly the sound of breathing began again. Heavy, uneven, right near the entrance. Reyes raised her camera, her face wet with tears. The lens caught a flash of movement, a hand, massive, dark, covered in hair, gripping the edge of the rock. Fingers curled, nails thick and gray. The creature was crawling inside. Morgan shouted for Harris to fire. The rifle roared, lighting up the cave for a split second. When the smoke cleared, the hand was gone, but the echo of the shot didn't fade. It was replaced by a deeper roar, louder than before, shaking the ground. They ran, out of the cave, down the creek bed, through thick fog that burned their throats. The sound of crashing trees followed them, closer every second. Harris tripped, falling into the mud. Morgan turned to help him, but Harris looked up, his eyes wide, and screamed. A huge shadow swept down, dragging him backward into the trees. His scream cut off all at once. Reyes was sobbing now, stumbling as she ran. "We can't stop," Morgan said. His legs ached, lungs burning, but he didn't slow down. They didn't stop until they reached a small ridge overlooking a narrow valley. The fog below moved like waves. They dropped to their knees, gasping for air. Then Reyes froze. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. A faint clicking sound came from the fog, like stones tapping together, slow, steady, almost like speech. "It's copying us," she said. "It's learning." Morgan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was staring at something in the mist below. Shapes, dozens of them, tall, moving slowly through the fog. He could see their outlines, broad shoulders, long arms, heads swaying side to side as they walked. Not one creature, many. Reyes began to laugh, a broken, scared laugh that didn't sound human. "There's more," she said. "There's more of them." Morgan grabbed her arm. "Don't move," he whispered. But it was too late. One of the shapes turned, its head lifting. The sound that followed was not a growl or a howl. It was a voice, low, rough, and strange, forming sounds that almost made words. Morgan raised his camera, hands shaking. The lens caught the faintest image before the screen went black. The last sound was the crack of branches behind him, and then everything fell silent except for the steady drip of water from the leaves above. Hours later, the camera light blinked weakly, showing only empty forest and torn packs scattered across the mud. The wind had stopped. The fog was lifting. A single flashlight lay on the ground, still glowing, its beam pointing toward a trail of blood that led downhill, straight into a dark opening in the earth. The forest was quiet again. The kind of quiet that didn't sound real, the kind that came only after something terrible had already happened. The air hung heavy and damp, smelling like moss, blood, and burnt wood. A soft mist rolled across the valley floor, wrapping around the trees like a shroud. The birds didn't sing. The wind didn't move. Everything was still. When the recovery team arrived 3 weeks later, the sky was gray and low. The agents moved in slow lines through the trees, their black uniforms blending into the shadows. They carried scanners, lights, and body bags. The mission was listed as evidence retrieval, though none of them knew what kind of evidence they were looking for. The lead investigator, Agent Holt, stepped over a tangle of roots and stopped by what was left of a tent. The nylon was torn to ribbons, the metal poles bent into strange shapes, as if crushed by hands stronger than steel. "Set perimeter," Holt ordered quietly. His voice sounded small in the vast silence. One of the younger agents lifted a camera, taking photos of the site. The flash lit the trees for an instant, revealing claw marks across the trunks, deep, long, and high above human reach. Near the fire pit, they found what remained of the first team's gear: a cracked radio, a shredded notebook, and a camera caked with mud. The lens was cracked, but the memory card was still inside. Holt took it carefully, slipping it into a bag marked classified. Nearby, they found footprints again, the same size, the same shape, each one pressed almost an inch deep into the wet ground. As they followed the trail, the fog thickened. The ground dipped into a narrow ravine, the soil dark and soft. Then one of the agents called out. Something was tangled in the roots ahead. It was a boot, half buried, the leather soaked and stiff. Inside was a human foot, still wearing part of a sock with an FBI logo on it. The team froze. One man swore under his breath. Holt crouched, studying the mark on the ground beside it. The print wasn't human. It was longer, wider, and the heel was sloped, as if whatever made it had walked on the edge of its feet. They pushed on, though none of them spoke now. The trees grew closer together, their trunks dark and slick. The air smelled wrong, wet fur and something sour like rot. Holt kept his light low. "Stay tight," he said. The sound of their footsteps mixed with dripping water. Somewhere ahead, a low hum began, faint but steady, like wind through a hollow log. The sound led them to a clearing. At its center was a hole in the ground, wide as a car, edges covered with old branches and moss. The air coming from it was warm, wet, and thick with the smell of decay. "Cave system," one agent whispered. Holt nodded and motioned for lights. They lowered a small drone inside. The camera feed flickered across the tablet screen, stone walls, narrow tunnels, and then something else. Bones, piles of them. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Human and animal mixed together, some broken clean, some gnawed. In the center of the pile sat a shape that looked almost carved, rocks stacked in a pattern, circles and lines like the markings found earlier. The feed cut to static. The drone didn't come back up. "Retrieve it," Holt said, but no one moved. Finally, two agents clipped lines to their harnesses and began the slow descent. Their voices came through the radios in short bursts. "About 20 feet down, bones everywhere." The sound turned fuzzy, then warped by static. "Wait, there's something." The signal broke, the rope jerked once, then went slack. The others pulled, shouting, but the line came up, cut clean through. No blood, no sign of struggle. Just silence again. Holt's hand shook as he turned off his radio. "We're done," he said. "Mark the coordinates. We're leaving." But as they turned to go, the sound came again, deep, low, and close. It wasn't a roar. It was a breath, slow and heavy, like something massive exhaling right behind them. The fog thickened, curling through the trees, hiding everything more than a few feet away. The nearest agent raised his light, and for a second the beam caught two pale eyes staring back from the mist. They were high, 9 feet off the ground, and motionless. "Don't move," Holt whispered. The eyes blinked once, then vanished. The trees shifted, branches cracking as something large moved around them. The agents fired, bullets echoing through the valley. But the sound didn't stop it. The fog swallowed the noise. When they stopped firing, the forest was silent again. By the time they reached their trucks, the sun had already set. Their boots were covered in mud, their faces white with fear. They didn't speak on the way back to base. Each man stared out the window, watching the tree line fade behind them. None of them noticed the faint shapes moving just beyond the headlights, keeping pace in the darkness. At headquarters, the recovered footage was reviewed by a small group in a locked room. The video began with shaking images of rain and trees. The sound was mostly static, but bits of voices cut through. Morgan's voice, Rhea's crying, a deep growl. Then the image shifted, showing the cave interior. The carvings on the wall glowed faintly in the dark, and something tall moved behind them, barely seen. The last frame showed a hand reaching toward the camera, the nails thick and black, before the feed went dark. The files were sealed within the hour. Every report, every photo, and every note was stamped top secret, non-biological threat. The official statement said the team was lost in a storm and killed in a rock slide. No mention of what the footage showed, but things didn't end there. Weeks later, fragments of the video appeared online, shaky, distorted clips showing brief flashes of the creature. Most viewers said it looked fake, but others weren't so sure. Hunters in Washington and Oregon began reporting strange sounds again. Deep calls that shook the trees, campsites found torn apart, tracks appearing overnight in snow that no animal could have crossed without leaving a path. In one leaked photo, the ground near the old site showed something new. Fresh prints beside the old ones. Smaller, lighter, but shaped the same way. As if there wasn't just one creature anymore. As if there were more. Agent Holt never returned to the field after that mission. He stopped answering calls, moved out of state, and disappeared 2 months later. The last message he left on his recorder was short and strange. "They're not animals," he said. "They remember." Now, years later, hikers still go missing near Mount St. Helens. Locals tell stories of lights in the trees and howls that sound too human. The forest has grown back over the old camp, swallowing the broken tents and scattered bones. The cave entrance is hidden again beneath moss and roots. But some nights, when the fog drifts low and the air goes still, you can hear the echoes of something moving just beyond the ridge, a slow, heavy step, like the earth itself breathing. And sometimes, if you look long enough into that mist, you might see them watching. Not one, but many, waiting silent and patient for whoever dares to come next.